Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Strategic Response Management Power Panel. I'm Michael Longren, Chief Marketing Officer at Responsive. Joining me as panelists are two industry leaders, Carrie Jordan, Global Director of Proposals, Microsoft, and Kristen Carloni, Global Head of the Aladdin Business Proposal Team at BlackRock. Welcome to you both. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time diving into the topic of Strategic Response Management, or SRM, both what it means to our panelists and the impact that it's had on their proposal teams and organizations. But before we dive into our discussion, I want to give our panelists time for quick intros. Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Awesome. So hello, everyone. I'm Carrie Jordan, and I run the Proposal Center of Excellence at Microsoft. My team is made up of about 50 proposal professionals, and we are a mix of FTEs and Shipley contractors. We provide end-to-end proposal support on strategic deals, as well as offer a scale self-service program for the deals that we can't directly support. And my team contributed to $8.5 billion in won revenue last fiscal year.
Wow, that's a huge impact. So welcome. Thank you, Carrie. And Kristen, over to you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Kristen Carloni, and I work at BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset manager. And so we have a bit of a different model because we have so many products and so many geographies. We have a decentralized RFP team. So last time I counted, I think there were about 8 different teams at the firm. I lead our Aladdin RFP team. Sorry, I should call it. I lead our Aladdin response management team. And we are selling the same technology externally that we use internally. So those are the products that we're selling. We have a global team of 11 people around the world. And we're also unique in that we not only service prospect requests, but also requests for current clients, which is critically important in the asset management and technology industries.
Thank you both for being here. So I'd love to start off with your thoughts on strategic response management. Responsive CEO Ganesh Shankar shared the definition of strategic response management as the people, practices, and technology that unlock organizational knowledge for profitable growth. How do you view strategic response management, and in particular, how it relates to your own journeys at Microsoft and BlackRock? Carrie, let's start with you.
I love this updated definition of SRM. I know we discussed it at APMP BPC this year, and I love where it landed. I think it really encapsulates the breadth of possibilities for strategic response management because while we both run proposal teams, what SRM really does is democratizes information. So no longer does the best proposal content have to sit tucked away in a SharePoint folder or on someone's hard drive. Microsoft also uses our SRM solution Responsive for non-proposal related content, as well as legal disclaimers, specific verbiage to be used with customers, whether in a proposal or otherwise.
I love that. And I really love the idea of putting a framework around what we're all trying to do. I think today our industry doesn't necessarily have a common way of talking about our respective roles, whereas like marketing, if you say that word, you kind of know what everybody's doing. So to try to put some consistency around it, I think will really help us in the way that we're talking about the role and therefore help us, up level the role up level the role and elevate what we're all doing here. And then my word of the year is strategic or strategy. I absolutely love it. When I first started off in my role at BlackRock, it was a fairly administrative role, right? It was kind of junior and it was more of a means to an end. It wasn't really a career path in itself. Over 10 years later, I've really been able to make a career out of it. And I now sit alongside my peers as the regional leads, reporting into the global head of sales. And the only way I've been able to do that is through strategy. So when you think about it, we're not just copying and pasting responses from a library. We need to think critically around what our prospects want to know and the different solutions that we offer. And that's strategic thinking. I also think all the time about how we can better the business. So several years ago, we were working on 2 product lines. Today, we cover 15. I've gone back time and time again to my boss to say, look, I think we can do more. I think we can adopt our process and our people and the great things we've done and do more with that and materially contribute to the bottom line. And we have. And so it's been a great success all these years. And when I look around me, as I mentioned, there are other proposal teams at the firm, and I see peers who have also been in the industry for a long time. So it's no longer, in my opinion, a means to an end, but really a great career path in itself.
That's great. Thanks, Kristen and Carrie. Both of you work at large, complex organizations So let's talk a little bit about increasing influence at an executive level. How have you been building and increasing credibility with your executives when articulating the role of your teams? Carrie, what has been your experience at Microsoft?
So this goes back to my presentation with Amanda Heather from my team that we gave at BPC in June called Capture, Quantify, Communicate. I really believe that the best way to grow your credibility, either as an individual contributor or for your team all up, is to capture the impact that you're driving, quantify it in meaningful business terms, and communicate it effectively with the right audiences. This activity alone will demonstrate your value and build rapport with those executives because they care about things like impact, ROI, and innovation. Personally, I also worked on honing executive presence through LinkedIn learning courses and observing executives during calls. And the other thing that I'll say is how critical confidence is. If you have confidence when you're delivering your metrics and your arguments to your management and your leaders, they'll believe you. If you don't believe in the role or the team, or you're not coming off with confidence, they'll really struggle to land. So I would just say combine that confidence with your data and the passion for your team's mission, and then you'll gain credibility with executives.
Thanks, Carrie. I loved your presentation at BPC. And in fact, part of that is featured in the 2024 Strategic Response Management Report. So I encourage people to read that. Kristen, what has been your experience at BlackRock?
Yeah, I love that so much, Carrie, too. And I think it's important to communicate your deliverables across a broad spectrum of executives. I also think it's really helpful to have one or two sponsors who just know all the great work that you're doing. I've been lucky that my previous bosses have now moved on to be the head of our business or our COO. Today, I report into the head of the global sales team, and they've all done RFPs before. And they also know the great work that we've been doing along the years. So to have them up there as a decision makers has been super helpful for us. And I'll give a concrete example. So 5 years ago, we merged with a new business, and they didn't have an RFP team. We had a team, but we didn't have technology. And they had the technology. It was RFPIO at the time. And I went to my boss at the time and I said, look, I'm going to take a bet. I bet that we can take on their business and not hire a single person, but I do need to leverage that technology of theirs. And he trusted me. He knew all the great work that we'd been doing. I'd been reporting it to him for years. And he said, all right, show me what you can do. A couple years later, I was able to point back and say, this was a success. We were one of the first teams to be able to merge with the new firm. We've adopted the technology. We haven't hired a single person, and we've contributed millions to the bottom line. And so, of course, you better believe I went back and I reported that back to him and said, look, you invested in us. This is what we did with your investment. What else can we do?
That is really awesome. All right, let's dive further into our discussion on SRM with some data. As you are aware, Responsive, in sponsorship with APMP, recently released our 2024 State of Strategic Response Management Report, which highlights how leading companies are winning more business. Two stats we uncovered. Carrie and Kristen, you're probably not surprised, is that 70% of organizations report that revenues generated through responses increased in the past year. Additionally, 77% of those surveyed say that the volume of work associated with RFPs and other strategic responses also increased. Given the backdrop of increased buyer demand and expectations for driving more revenue, how have you each secured, maintained, and even grown investments in the strategic response management function for your teams?
Absolutely. That report really resonated with me. Of course, complexity is up, volumes are up. And when I dug into my own data, it really inspired me to look at my own data. And I found that our business is really highly mediated by proposal. So even more than the 70% statistic that was quoted. And you'll know, Carrie and I both love to dig into our data. And I'm sure she'll agree with me. One of the things that I found really interesting was the statistic that a lot of teams report on their volumes, but far fewer report on their ROI. And I remember literally the same boss I mentioned earlier, I was talking to him about what kind of reporting he wanted. And he said, Kristen, I don't want to hear about your volumes. That is a measure of how busy you are. I know that you're working a full work week. I know your team is too. I completely trust that. What I need to know is your impact. Tie that back to revenues. Tie that back to my bottom line. tie that back to time saved, right? Because time saved is money saved as well. And so I think it's really critical to think not just about what you're doing, but the impact that it has. That's really what executives are looking for. And oftentimes it goes back to their bottom line.
That is such great guidance. Carrie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Kristen. Impact over activity is something that we say at Microsoft in all areas, whether it's our personal performance reviews, our team stats. Impact over activity is always going to resonate. And so I'll again echo my earlier answer on capture, quantify, communicate. And to further echo Kristen too, be sure you're not just capturing proposal metrics that your team cares about. Obviously, you need to know SLAs, turnaround time, number of deals. You need to do that as a leader, but be creative beyond win rate as well. Win rate is another one that's kind of obvious, but I think what executives are looking for are ROI. And so the way that we calculate that, in case it's not super obvious, is that we take the cost to run our service with the team and technology divided by the value of revenue that you've won. And so that's a great one. Sales hours saved, which is a slightly more complex and nuanced formula that I won't try to get into here. But leaders will listen to those kind of stats. If they know you're giving time back to their sellers to be in front of customers, to build pipeline, that's what they care about. Giving executives data that they care about so that when they have $1 million to spend, they're going to choose to spend it with you. So for example, I know that my ROI for my team last year was 746 to 1. So what that means to them is that if they give me $1, I'm going to give them 746 back. If they give me $1 million, I'm going to give them $746 million back. And that is a far more impactful statement than we had a 70% win rate, or we closed, we did 400 deals last year. It's all important, but channeling who you communicate what data point to is critical.
I love the tie back to business outcomes, and wow, that's an incredible ROI. So that's really amazing. No session on strategic response management is complete without talking about AI. So let's dig in. We have another really interesting stat from our research that shows that leading companies with higher revenue growth are 3 times more likely to use AI-powered strategic response management platforms than novices. We know you both fall into the leader category. So how are you leveraging AI in your response management? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that stat at all. I mean, it's no surprise that revenue growth tends to follow innovation leaps, so that tracks completely. Working for Microsoft, we've had a pulse on AI for almost 2 years now, and this has been, if any proposal lead has the pressure to apply AI, it's at Microsoft. And so we obviously use Microsoft Copilot every day for basic productivity email drafts, meeting recaps, and productivity industry research and things like that. And even in some answer and content drafting for our proposals. We're also piloting generative AI for auto responding to proposal questionnaires and RFPs, connecting our responsive library as well as internal SharePoint sites and technical documentation resources. And I think this is going to be the most impactful use case of AI on strategic response management. The ability to auto respond with a first draft instead of manually searching for answers one by one will save days, if not weeks, off of your proposal team's time.
Thank you, Carrie. That's amazing. Kristen, can you elaborate on your team's use of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could riff on this for hours. I think we don't have the time. Carrie really went through the gamut of a lot of the different ways that we're seeing AI. And Michael knows I like to sometimes give a little bit of perspective and not directly answer the questions that he's asking of me. But one of the places I found that we've spent a lot of our time on AI is actually preparing for it, not even using it, which has been very interesting for me. So I think a lot of people will say it's not a push button technology. And we went in, we pushed the button, and surprise, the response wasn't that great. And I think a lot of teams are stopping there, right? They're saying AI, it's not really living up to the hype. It's a scam. I can just do this faster myself. And we are pushing through. We believe in the vision. We think there's so much that it can do, but it takes a lot of work on our end. So we have been very systematically testing and seeing what works and what doesn't. Where are there actual constraints and where do we just have to find the right workaround? A couple things that we found, and I want to cover this in case anybody else is early in their journey. We had to really overhaul our content library. We had a great library in place for a world without AI. But today, when you have to point AI to the right information, you have to structure your content library around that. For example, we had to remove internal comments because AI was picking them up and wasn't interpreting them. So we spent a lot of time doing that. And then we also realized that we weren't great prompters. Why would we be? We've never done this before, right? So a lot of work has been done, and responsive includes the ability to add additional prompts. And we've had to practice with that a lot. So there's a lot on my mind. There are other workflow areas. I want to be able to use this. For example, having it automatically recommend an SME to reach out to, having it write entire executive summaries based on our content. I also have a big vision board of where I hope the technology is going to go, but it might not be there yet. But in the meantime, we're absolutely getting our hands dirty, having it generate responses, figuring out what's working and what isn't, and how we can try to solve that today.
That totally makes sense. Getting your hands dirty, I totally agree. Content library and overall cleanliness of the data is incredibly important, and practicing with prompting, that totally makes sense as well. So we could probably talk for another hour or more on AI, but we are approaching time. So I'd like to ask one final question. What's one pro tip you have for response leaders who are looking to up-level the impact of their teams? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'd say do not sleep on AI. It is not a trend that is going away. And to just encourage you to not let yourself, your team, be the Blockbuster or the BlackBerry, as much as I loved those companies, because you don't want to become antiquated. And if you're not infusing this technology into your processes, unfortunately, you just will. And if you lean in, though, and you're curious, even though there's still so much up in the air and it may not be perfect, just do something to get your proposal team leveraging AI. If you don't, my guess is that your executive leadership will tell you what to do and how you should apply it versus you proactively telling them your plan for how to implement AI into your proposal team. And so if you want to be in the driver's seat of how exactly AI is going to affect your role in proposals, then you need to be proactively doing it yourself and telling your leadership what you're seeing.
Love that. Kristen, your thoughts?
I agree. And I think we should shout it louder for the people in the back. I think it's such a great career opportunity as well, because everyone's kind of trying to figure out what this new thing is. And if you can arise as the person helping drive forward that conversation, I've seen it in various parts of my firm where, the 99% is kind of following the 1% who really have a grasp of this. And so it's really creating opportunity. But I interpreted this a little bit differently when I think we talk about impact in terms of what you're doing, but then going back to communicating it out. And so I want everybody who's listening in on this call to first convince themselves. So I want you to be able to look in the mirror and tell yourselves that your team is having an impact. It's not that administrative role that we were talking about earlier. And if you need help thinking through that, please allow me to help you. I know in certain industries, like Carrie was saying, your company might be investing a couple $100,000 in you, and you're returning hundreds of millions of dollars. That may even just be one proposal, right? Some of the things we're bidding on are these huge opportunities, and it's not all the RFP, right? But the RFP is some of that. It's a really critical part of that. And there are certain businesses that cannot be won if it doesn't go through the RFP stage. I'll also add that we have a really critical skill set that not everybody can do. Not everybody, you see some of your SMEs, not everybody can take technical language and put it into a clear proposal. That really is a unique skill set. And finally, the amount of knowledge, the breadth of knowledge that we have in our heads, and more importantly, at our fingertips is really, really powerful. And I know Carrie and myself, we also make that available to other people at the firm. And without us, that just wouldn't happen. So I hope that you've convinced yourself. Having done that, dig into your own data and please tell your executive leadership about it. Keep them updated. Keep telling them about it. They are investing in you and they want to know what their investment is giving them back. So don't be afraid to tell them.
That's really great guidance to close on. Thank you, Carrie and Kristen, for sharing your insights. And thank you to our audience for joining us. Let's continue to learn from each other as we continue to adopt strategic response management to advance our teams in the proposal management profession. Thank you both.